Hi there, I'm Anthony Falcone, and for my author discussion, I'll be focusing on the Black Power movement. Now, as we didn't have any required readings in class regarding the Black Power movement, I thought it best to seek out a few figures that played a major role in the Black Power movement and find, at least for them, describe how they contributed in their own ways, and at least for some of them, find some of the literature in the form of speeches that they gave to see how they impacted the world around them at the time that they were going around promoting the Black Power movement and spreading their messages regarding racial injustice and, the fight to end racial injustice and the fight for inequality. So going forward, the Black Power movement was mainly focused on an emphasis on racial pride, and that to me was, at the time, you had a lot of stuff beginning to happen. Martin Luther King Jr. was all turn the other cheek, and that not isn't necessarily bad, but it doesn't do much to set the minds of ease of the African Americans focused on these movements, that they're not the problem, that they're not contributing to the issue. So the Black Power movement, I at least interpret it as a real message to African Americans in the United States that we are here to contribute to society, and we want to be proud of who we are and what we are, and we want to work to progress ourselves in the community, focus on our values, make sure we are, upstanding citizens in the community, and we play a role in the development of how our country is shaped. So that's where it also tied in encouragement of political and economic success. And that, to me, it kind of, looking back to Booker T. Washington, I took that and saw some similarities there. Perhaps some of the messages in the Black Power movement were influenced by Booker T. Washington, and how he thought rather, that African Americans should do the best they could to be successful themselves, to improve their ability to be successful in society and to be more widely accepted. So some key figures of the Black Power movement, as I suggested before, as we didn't have any required readings, I thought I would select a couple of significant figures. Some wrote, some did not. So beginning, Richard Wright, author. He started off, we'll get into him in a bit. Kwame Ture, he also played a massive role in getting the Black Power movement, at least the phrase leading the movement, the Black Power, getting that going. Malcolm X, a massive contributor as well. Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale, heavily influenced by the Black Power movement and progressed the agenda of the Black Power movement as well. And they eventually worked with they started the Black Panthers political party, and we'll look into that in a bit. And Ella Baker, who was much older than most of the other individuals listed above, but she played a very active role in getting the message across as well. So we'll look at her at the end. So beginning here with Richard Wright, the origins of the Black Power movement. Richard Wright, he grew up in Mississippi and he experienced quite a bit of racial injustice growing up, and that was definitely an issue for him. And he ended up living in France later in life and writing novels such as Mandingo, which would later be made into a rather successful film. But he was the first to really coin the term Black Power, at least in a more modern sense that we're studying it here. And it was based around his travel to Western Africa, and he logged his travels there and focused on the newly independent country from British imperial rule, and saw how the people were adapting to the society, the new culture, the new society, their new independent direction, and he used the term Black Power. And I think that was a major point where the movement really began, not necessarily quite mainstream, but at least had he not planted the seed, I don't know that the movement would have existed in the way we observe it now today. So then going to Kwame Ture, he was born Stokely Carmichael, but then changed his name to Kwame Ture. He was educated at Howard University, and he was the one to really popularize the term Black Power. And this all happened, James Meredith was the first African-American student at the University of Mississippi, and during the March Against Fear, a massive march of solidarity for the African-American community, he was shot by a white individual, and this obviously created a massive rift in the communities. Toure responded with a speech, and this is where he popularized the term Black Power, and this was what really got the movement going, got the ideas, regarding racial pride, things of that sort, racial advancements, success. This is where the workings of the movement began. Now we move on. Malcolm X, he in many ways epitomized what the Black Power movement was about, and that, in the sense of racial pride. And he definitely had the alternative methods he used. Some of them can be seen as questionable or not, but By Any Means Necessary was a major talking point, a major, I guess, slogan you could say of his, and that was, as opposed to turn the other cheek, we as African Americans must do whatever is necessary to achieve equality and success in this country. And so this is, he spent time in prison as growing up, and he was only 20 years old. He converted to the Nation of Islam, and this is when he became, I guess you could argue, somewhat radicalized with his beliefs regarding racial equality inequality in the United States at the time. And one famous speech I found of his to be quite significant, The Ballad and the Bullet. And this I found to be rather significant because it goes into detail regarding how African Americans need to contribute in the society, and how they need to vote, they need to be active politically to see the changes they want to see. And he kind of outlined how they should go about it. And I found this to be significant because you have a massive figure now, massive speaker, definitely in the community, representing a lot of the people's beliefs, and he's giving you advice on how to create changes politically through the means of politics in your communities. I found this to be rather significant. And he was unfortunately assassinated in 1965, as many opposition individuals saw his views as very radical. So he was unfortunately assassinated. Moving forward here, Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. Now, these two individuals, they met each other in college in Oakland at Merritt College, and they co-founded the Black Panther Party. Now, they both were heavily influenced by Malcolm X and his By Any Means Necessary teachings. And obviously, the Black Panther Party, they drew heavily from the Black Power movement and sought to, obviously, once again, bolster racial pride and fight to end inequality. Newton was shot and killed in Oakland, unfortunately, and Bobby Seale is still living to this day. However, much less, I guess, active in the fight against inequality now than he obviously was then. And so that leads us into the Black Panther Party. This was formed in 1966, again, formed by the aforementioned Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale. And the Black Panther movement, the Black Panther Party, rather, was heavily influenced by the Black Power movement and Malcolm X as well. So you had a combination of racial pride and a more radical individual in Malcolm X, creating a group of followers that were extremely proud of who they were, and they weren't afraid to fight for what they believed in and seen as and to fight for it, to end inequality, fight for equality. So they were very aggressive against police brutality and racial injustices, and this resulted in the violent murders of a few of their members, as there was some issues regarding the federal government and the Black Panther Party itself. So within the Black Panther Party, there was a very, I guess you could say, a pretty great issue regarding trust within the party of individuals, and whether or not some were talking to police officers and trying to cause problems and break the party up from within. But the Black Panther Party definitely heavily drew from the Black Power movement and the teachings of Malcolm X. This leads to Ella Baker, and she was a woman, the only woman I've mentioned so far, and I found her to be extremely significant because she not only mentored Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, but she worked within the communities and with the Black Power movement to not only progress the agendas of what, racial pride, fight to end inequalities, but she spoke up for women as well. And I found this to be rather significant, as while this was all going on, it could be understandable perhaps for the issues of women's rights to be swept aside, and that's definitely not what her objective was. And she made sure to keep them at the front of attention as well with the Black Power movement, to ensure that while African Americans of the community were fighting for their rights, women, a part of that community as well, would also be granted the same rights. So I thought that was rather significant. And then just one quick wrap up of the Black Power movement to conclude. It promoted racial equality, a fight against inequality. It promoted pride in the African American community regarding their advancements and trying to be successful in politics, get an education, financial success, to really equip themselves to carry on the battle as best they could. And so really this movement, while aggressive at times, as we observed with the Black Panther Party, did a lot to generate pride within the African American community and really fight to end a lot of the issues that they were encountering, at least not necessarily end, as we've seen we're still dealing with many of these issues today, but at least bring to the center of attention the issues and fight to at least bring an end to a lot of the problems, the more severe problems that they were having at the time. Thank you, and have a good one.